And we are ready to start. Committee, thank you. I appreciate we have out-of-state conferee. There's only one conferee for this bill. And with that, we are going to get started. I open the hearing on House Bill 2505 and ask Jason Long to give us a brief overview of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2505 makes amendments to the Student Data Privacy Act and the Student Online Personal Protection Act. Both of those acts were enacted within the last decade to try to protect student information that's kept by school districts or that is kept through an online educational provider. Both amendments have to deal with a national assessment provider like the ACT. The first section of the bill amends a statute in the Student Data Privacy Act that generally requires prior written permission from a parent or legal guardian of a student before certain tests, questionnaires, surveys, or examinations can be administered to that student. Those tests and questionnaires, et cetera, are ones that include questions regarding the student's personal beliefs on issues such as religion, morality, family life. Those require parental prior permission before those can be administered. House Bill 2505 would create an exception for national assessment providers like the ACT so that the provider would have to provide written notice to the student's parent or legal guardian prior to administering such surveys or tests or questionnaires, but would not need prior written permission in order to do so. But they must provide an opportunity for the student or the student's parent or legal guardian to opt out of being administered that survey or questionnaire. What kind of surveys or questionnaires such a provider or national assessment provider would use, I'm going to leave to the conferee to describe that. The bill is more general in nature. Section 2 of 2505 amends the definitional section in the Student Online Personal Protection Act. The definition of operator in particular is amended to exclude these national assessment providers. What an operator is an entity that provides an educational online product for educational purposes. And if you are an operator under the Act, then you cannot engage in certain practices such as targeted advertising to the student, creating student profiles from the information, selling student information, except in very narrow circumstances. And so the bill would create, again, a narrow exclusion from the definition of operator for these national assessment providers that may be providing an educational online product for students so they can engage in the business that they're used to engaging in with those students. The bill will go into effect on July 1st of this year. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair.
Questions from the committee? I think you did a pretty good job, and we have a conferee that'll probably fill in the gaps. So, thank you. Next up is our proponent, John Clark, Senior Director of State Government Relations, ACT. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wherever to get you in.
Members of the committee, John Clark, the Senior Director of State Government Relations for ACT. I infer it's been kind of a long day, so I will be succinct, and I will be glad to take any questions if I'm too succinct. But let me start by saying there's no fiscal note attached to this. Let me also say that ACT for a long time was collecting student data on paper and pencil with the old number 2. When we moved to an online registration system, the graduation in technology caused us to migrate to another chapter of the code, as the reviser said, pertaining to operator. So House Bill 2505 would give national assessment, college and career readiness providers, assessment providers, an exception to that rule. As it is, it negatively impacts ACT's ability and institutions like ACT to provide some services that are intended to benefit students, namely the Education Opportunity Service. Now, what this is, in effect, the great majority of folks that we deal with the Education Opportunity Service are post-secondary institutions who want to have names of students that they can recruit. It can be general in terms of a range of scores that they're looking for. It can be scores they're looking to provide scholarships for those students. Or let's say they want to diversify with more females, the engineering program. They could get names of female students that have a range from 27 to 36 in science and an interest in careers in science. So that's kind of what that's all about. We also release those to vetted scholarship entities, and millions of dollars have been provided students through EOS opportunities that they would most likely never have been aware of. So that's the first one. There's one other change in addition to how that impacts EOS. There's currently a requirement for parents to opt their students in to participate in EOS. House Bill 2505 would make that an opt-out. They would be provided written permission, but we think that that gives those students that have the most benefit, those that might be low income, first generation, not be able to not know how to navigate the college process, might be a barrier for them to receive this information. I want to underscore that even with the parents being able to opt out, a student still has to opt in. And what the specific things that we would release to these entities is student name, address, gender, high school email address, birth date, expected year of high school graduation, and racial ethnic background if voluntarily provided. And there is a prefer not to respond. So these participating entities have all agreed to use the information only for the purpose of sharing information about their programs. Let's see, the other two areas where this really impacts us is in our ability to perform longitudinal research. That's a big part of what ACT is about. It's a research institution. We collect data from the ACT test over years, and that's what we use to ensure the consistency of the assessments themselves. It also enables us to conduct some valuable longitudinal research for policymakers like yourself, as well as state and local educators. Each year we provide, as some of you might have seen, the graduating class data, and we only report aggregate data. We don't report anything that has personally identifiable information, but we do need to have that covered data to conduct our analysis. Finally, the last is that under that definition of operator, it defines, the statute gives authority for the direction of educational research to the state or district. This approach assumes that only states and districts should generate research proposals, and it excludes ACT and other entities like us with the research expertise from doing that. While it says can be used for legitimate research purposes as allowed by state or federal law, it is limited to research conducted under the direction of a school or the state government. By exempting a national college and career readiness assessment provider, such as the ACT, from the definition, it will ensure ACT can perform research activities as long as only aggregate information is reported publicly. That concludes my testimony.
Thank you, and I'll start off with the questions. As far as what's being reported and gathered, there's nothing changing, is that correct?
So there is nothing changing, and it's an excellent question. The only question that I know of that will change, and this speaks to our ability to do research, is next year we will ask one additional question as to what the mode of learning was this past year in terms of were you at home, were you in school, virtual, hybrid, and what we're doing there is we're assessing the impact of COVID on education outcomes. So that is the only change that I'm aware of for a very, very, very long time.
Further questions from the committee? Representative Estes.
Part of the previous bills and future bills, parents are very concerned about personal questions their children are being asked. Mm-hmm. Is there anything of a personal nature, a child's belief system, at all that you ask? And could we please have a list of the questions that you ask
Sure, and I will have to follow up with that list, but one sticks out in particular that you may want to know about, and it is about asking about religion. It is a non-required field. There, on top of that, is a prefer not to respond answer choice, and the only reason that we utilize that question is for religious-based post-secondary institutions, let's say a Catholic institution that might want to know Catholic students that might be interested in attending there and provide them information about their school. You bet.
Representative Poskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So can you tell me this would include the ACT registration information that they fill out all those questions online as they're registering? Would it be tied to the work keys information? And then it includes ACT test scores as well, correct?
It would. As far as whether it applies to work keys, we don't collect that same kind of information that we do for the ACT. It would certainly include pre-ACT as well as the ACT.
Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? Seeing none, you did a good job.
Thank you.
Appreciate your succinctness, but I also appreciate the chance that we had to come in and allow you to speak and have this hearing. And committee, there are no opponents. I will probably look at working this bill next week. Also in the area of working bills, Deborah sent out information. Oh, we're closing the hearing, and I just wanted to give you the update. Deborah sent you out information on my computing science bill in regards to the balloon language. I wanted you to be able to see that, be able to look at the responses that was given to you in regards to what I'm trying to accomplish. I am trying to meet what was discussed in committee last week. So if you could please look at that, we might have a chance to work on that tomorrow, and I wanted you to be prepared for that. Again, Deborah sent that out here, I think, this morning. So with that committee, oh, okay. Yeah, 582 North, the Brown Bag Lunch Series is at noon, I think noon. So I would encourage you, if you can make it. There is no lunch provided. Yeah, it's one with the state board. So, if you find some pearls to eat and then come up to 582. With that committee, we do have a meeting tomorrow, and I think the information provided at that won't take a long time, so we should have time to work on a bill. And with that committee, we are adjourned. Thank you for showing up.